This is part 2 of the craft room series, and in this video I'm going to build the new desks for the room. In thinking about the desks that we wanted to make, I wanted to make something that would hang off the Cleat system on the walls, and where the lowest cleat was too high for the height of the desk that we wanted. So I came up with an idea where the desk would be both hung from above a little bit and supported from below and cantilever off of the wall. So the first thing I made was a prototype. I had some scrap bits of plywood I could use. So I wanted to make the desktop as a torsion box, which is basically a frame with a thin skin on the top and bottom. Sort of think of a hollow core door. It gives you a lightweight panel that has a lot of structural strength, and it gives you a nice flat surface for a desktop. So I cut the pieces for the frame, and I put the frame together. I cut a thin piece of plywood for the top and bottom, and I attached that. I tried to trim the top and bottom using the CNC machine sort of as a manual edge trimming shaper, which worked, but it's not really the easiest way to do this. Then I attached a panel to the back of the torsion box, and I put a cleat along the top of that panel. I made 2 quick structural side panels that the desktop will sit in the middle of. So with the prototype, I was just trying to see whether this idea would work as a desk cantilevered off the wall. So I wasn't really concerned with what it was going to look like and what bits of it you were going to see and not see, and to work out what I needed for a structure. And we put it up, and it seemed to work pretty well. Had a little bit of flex, but it would work fine as a desk. But it's probably not something that you want to sit on. And Calvin used this for a couple of months. He's done schoolwork and gaming at it. So with the prototype working, I wanted to build the finished pieces. And the idea was to make a 4-foot wide desk for Calvin and a 6-foot wide desk for Bonnie. So I started by making a set of torsion boxes. On the wider 6-foot desk, I was thinking I would put, along with the supports on each end, I would put some supports on the underside. So I wanted to make sure the cross pieces on the frame of the torsion box were in locations that I could also put the support pieces on the underside of the desk. So I would have something to attach those pieces to. So I used glue and finish nails to put the frame together. And 1/4-inch plywood for the top and bottom surfaces. I started to cut my sheet of plywood and then realized because I have a 4-foot and a 6-foot sheet, I really want to get a 4-foot piece off the end of the sheet of plywood. Then cut the remaining sheet into half to get the 2 6-foot pieces. So I used the full sheet of plywood. And I had a piece from the adjacent basement room that I had salvaged a few years ago that I could use for the top surface of the 4-foot desk. So I cut a piece from that. So it's sort of nice using a little bit of the house to make the furniture for the house. Carefully put the surface on. So the structure of this is a little bit like an airplane where the strength is in the outer surface. finally got a new glue bottle and filled that. Works much better. This is the old piece of plywood going on. And I sanded this piece just a little bit because it was a little rough and it just needed a little cleaning up. Then I flush trimmed the edges. For the actual desk surface, I got a sheet of 1/4-inch MDF. And my idea was to glue that down to the top surface of the desk structure and to make that the surface of the desk. So I glued the MDF down with contact cement. And with contact cement, you let the two surfaces dry for about 15 or 20 minutes. Then you hold them just apart. And I used some dowels that I had that I thought would work, as you can sort of roll them and adjust them, but they sort of roll too easily. And it worked, but I think square pieces would have been a little better. Then you carefully take out the center and you stick the center down first. And then you use a roller to put some pressure on that glue joint, and the glue holds together. This is how plastic laminate is put down. Then I flush trimmed that edge. Now that the desk boxes are done, I can start making all the bits that are going to attach to those. So I wanted to make a trim piece at the front edge of the desk. And I had a piece of something. I thought at first it was maple, but it's definitely not maple. I think it's alder. It's my guess, but I'm not exactly sure what it is. It got a little stuck on my throat plate fin as the wood was sort of closing in on the fin. So I used a wedge to open the kerf up. So at this point, I'm sort of slowly cutting this piece down to get to a point where I can cut out the pieces that I need. So I'm shaping the lumber down to what I need. As I was going to need two of the same piece, one for the 6-foot and one for the 4-foot desks. So I cut the piece in half, and I made a sort of a thick piece and a thin piece, and then those would go together in a rabbet to make a sort of tall, thin piece that would cover the face of the torsion box, and then a thicker piece that would sort of be a soft bullnose edge for the desk. So I cut a rabbet into the thicker piece. Then I cut the thicker piece to the length that I actually needed. Then I rounded over the edge, which would be the front edge of the desk, both on the top and the bottom. Then I can glue those two pieces together, and it gives me a shape that I can attach to the front of the desk box. And I just used glue and pin nails. The face that's going to attach to the desk, I needed really flat so it would sit flush with the edge of the desk. So I jointed the two pieces together, and I cut the piece to length. I wanted to attach this with screws to the desk, and I could hide those screws under the lip on the front of the desk. So I'm drilling the holes for those screws. I used a bigger drill bit to make the countersink for the screw heads. Then I could clamp that piece exactly where I wanted it and attach it with screws. I needed to make some curvy pieces for the desks, so I cut those out on the CNC machine. I had an idea, and I'm still wondering whether I'm going to complete it or not, to hang our printer under the bigger desk. And I made some sort of legs to hang the printer on the underside of the desk. So that's what I'm taking out here. I also cut out the big side panels from this piece. And I cleaned everything up. In the end, I was finding the spindle sander actually worked pretty well on every part. And I didn't really have to use the disc sander. It's really easy to take off too much with the disc sander. Then I figured out where the side panels were going to attach. I find my ideas about the design change as I'm making most things. So I like to put things together with screws because it gives me the flexibility to go backwards. In fact, these pieces, I think this is the third time I cut these out because I wasn't getting the shape right. I drilled the holes that will attach these pieces to the desk. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to hold these to the sides while I attached them, because they had to be very precise in their location, but I also had to drive the screws in. So I ended up rotating the whole desk panel so I could put the end panel on the end and just have it sit there in the right location. Then I could attach it. I didn't want to mar the desk surface, so I put some strips down on my work table. And I could look at how the under the desk supports would work. And I drilled out the holes for the printer support before I attached these pieces. So I laid these out with some screws, actually little bolts with countersunk heads. So you can see how that's going to work. And this was, I think, the second time I cut these pieces out. As the first time I cut them out, the dados I cut were on the wrong sides. So I cut them out without the dados, and then I did the dados manually. And I was sure of where they were going to go. I took the side panels off. You can see how the screws are important now. Because I realized I didn't want the back panel to show on the ends. So I cut a rabbet in the edge of the side panels so the back panel would be hidden. Because I'd attached it with screws, I can put it back in exactly the same place now. I cut up a bunch of cleats at this point, as I'll need cleats for the desks and for the shelves I want to make in the future. I wanted to put the back panel on at this point, so I wanted to hold the desk with the back up, so I could place the back panel in its location and have it just sit there. So I held the desk up with some clamps, and I cut the piece for the back panel to the right length. And I must have done this in the morning because my shirt is different. So now I can just put this piece in place and make sure it fits. And I put a support piece in the middle just to hold up the plywood as it was sagging a little bit. And I can just attach this with screws. Then I needed a cleat along the bottom edge of the back, so I attached that. In doing this, I realized I really should rotate the desk 180 degrees, so I'm drilling down instead of up. And this is much easier. So I did the cleat that way. For the under the desk supports, I wanted to do these after I had the back panel put on, as I could rest the back of these supports against the back panel, instead of trying to get them all in line without any physical reference. So with the back panel in place, these supports just go into the corner between the underside of the desk and the back panel. And it makes it much harder to screw them up. And this is where having the support of the internal bracing of the torsion box helps, as I can put these screws into those supports. Now the desk is getting pretty close, and I can rotate it so it's right side up now. And the very last thing to do is to make a piece of trim that'll sit along the top and cover the cleat and the back panel. So I cut out some more of what I think is alder from the same piece. And I needed to make a piece with an L-shaped section with a thin part that'll cover the top and a thicker part to face the desk that'll give it a little more thickness and weight. Because of the way I did the rabbet on the back panel, I have a funny little shape to cut out on the ends of this piece. So I sketched out the shape I needed as best I could and then cut that shape out on the bandsaw. And after a few fittings, I got it to fit nicely. So that was building the 6-foot desk. And now I can put together the 4-foot desk, which is exactly the same, except it doesn't have the under the desk supports. So it's just putting the sides on, putting the back on, putting the 2 cleats on the back, and the top piece of trim. That top piece of trim I just attached with some pin nails. It really could just sit there without any attachment. I figured if I ever need to take this apart, it'd be nice if that piece comes off sort of easily. Then I put polyurethane on everything. I sort of used regular polyurethane and I rubbed it on with a rag. So I'm not sure if this is sort of normally done, and it kind of worked. It probably would have been a little better with a brush, I think. I put a satin finish on everything, at least what you can see. Then I sanded the desk surface with 320 sandpaper really quickly. Then I tried spraying on a glossy polyurethane finish to the desk surface. And this worked fairly well, but it's definitely not perfect. Then we brought Calvin's new desk in. And you can see how that fits on the wall. My fear was I was going to do all this work and I'd forgotten something and it just wouldn't work. We brought in the bigger 6-foot desk, and I had measured to make sure they were both going to fit. And they do, at least on this wall anyways. Then we brought Bonnie in. This is the first time she's seen these.
Oh, hey, these are nice.
That's nice.
They're really nice. This wall needs to...
What, be better?
Yeah, yeah, those will be all professional.
Mom, that's what I said. What?
They're so nice.
They're too nice?
They're too nice. That's a good thing, right? It's like they're too nice.
Yeah, but
I know, it's like, no, I want these to be like,
Oh, like that?
Yeah.
So basically what it came down to is she thought they looked too nice and they made the wall cleats not look so good now.
No, it looks really good. Now I'm glad I have like a nice rug. Like actually, it looks like real furniture.
Yeah.
We noticed that the desks seemed springy and didn't have as much support as it seemed like they should. So I took them off and realized I'd forgotten the screw that goes between the side panel and the cleat, which is probably the most important screw in the entire structure. So I put those on, and now the desks are much firmer, much more solid feeling.
So now that the desk is in place, I can kind of see what the space is like under here. And I've been wondering about putting a cleat either on the wall or probably on the back panel of this desk, and then making another little sort of shelf for the printer. And I like that idea, but in doing that, I think it puts the printer too far back, so that when you're sitting at the desk, you have to reach too far under the desk to get your print. So I like about hanging it off the supports is that it makes the printer closer to the front of the desk. So it's doing it with these little legs is, I think, a little bit less elegant, but it makes the printer more useful.
Thanks for watching.